All right, our next speaker is Father Troy Overton, Region 5 chaplain, and he is from the Archdiocese of Louisville. And I think scouting alignment with Catholic doctrine or something on that order. You've got it in your schedule. So here you go, and you got to speak into the mic.
And I'm supposed to do all of that in an hour. And only in scouting do you discover that you are a co-presenter with a person that you've never met until that morning. So Dylan and I are going to try and split this time and hopefully make it meaningful for you. Now, the risk of giving someone a handout is that they will spend all their time looking at the handout and not paying attention to what you got to say. The vast majority of that handout is actually an outline of American history in the last 60 years. So for those of you who are well, let's say 50 and older, you probably know that. For those of you who are 40 and under, this may be something some of it you've never heard of. I would suggest that part of what the issues that we deal with today in Catholic Scouting is generational, in the sense that you've got a good chunk of your local leaders at the troop level, unit level, who are in their 30s and 40s, and those are the children of the 1980s. And yet you also have a great sense of, I feel, at least as a priest, division within the church on many levels. And so I'm not trying to solve all that, but I'm trying to put the scouting issues that we're dealing with within that context. So I think I'm a historian, I guess, by nature, so knowing our history and where we come from, I think, helps us understand where we are today. And so I do have some space here at the end to address a couple of specific issues. But again, my approach is going to be more about how do we move forward rather than remain reactive. And I think that's where we are. We are in a posture of being reactive right now and rather than proactive. I would call your attention to some, yes?
Father, will there be time there for Dylan too to be able to talk about the official scout?
Yes, I hope so. That's his half. You might have noticed on some of the and Bill touched on some of this last night, some of the more recent marketing, if you will, for the National Catholic Committee on Scouting, the logo and the iconography, the emphasis is on Catholic scouting. And I think that's a very important thing for us to acknowledge, that we're about that. Now, some of you may have looked at this brochure last night. This is from our local diocesan committee in Louisville. I am the diocesan chaplain, so part of what I'm doing is rehearsing things I'm working on for my archbishop at home. And we have 4 different organizations of scouting in our diocese. And as the chaplain, I work with all of them, not just with Scouting America. So my perspective might not just be limited to that, but I think we can also learn from those other branches of scouting and their experience. Today, as we look at the world in which we live in, I think scouting has become a platform for some to air some of the cultural, religious, and even political differences that we have in our country. I don't think scouting is the only element in American society to experience that, but I feel it very much alive and well. I'd take you back to the world of the 1950s to start that. I think there's a nostalgia about that time in America, which many people did not live. But think of the scouting paintings of Norman Rockwell. That's in the mind of some people, that's what scouting should be. It should live in that world. And I love that world, by the way. I really do. But I don't think that model is the only one for youth and families today. One of the things that was very typical of that time, though, is that politics, religion, and family life were basically on the same page. Things like For example, the National Prayer Breakfast, which you may know about, that was started during Eisenhower's administration. Billy Graham became the first great evangelist in the 20th century, and he was one of the first to use television as a means of preaching the gospel. You also have, at that time, a great deal of sense of patriotism. We're in the post-World War II years. America is leading the way. You also have a decided battle between democracy and communism and the Cold War. All of those things help to fuel a very unified country on many, many different levels. And I don't state that as positive or negative. I just say it's a fact from our own experience as Americans. The 1960s changed a lot of that, for better or for worse, depending on how you look at it. But it created different, the beginnings of what would evolve into different camps in American society. The Vietnam War, for example, I think that's one of the great events of the 20th century in the sense that it was the first war that I know of in American history that did not have the full support of the U.S. population. It became divisive. It was the first time that veterans returned home to a country that did not reward them for their service. And that began to change how Americans look at each other. Not just how we look at ourselves, but how do we look at each other? And that polarity was even heightened by some of the great assassinations, John F. Kennedy, Robert F. Kennedy, and Martin Luther King, and Malcolm X as well. Those things began to build a world in which scouting at the time I don't think didn't seem to be affected at that time, but it has built a momentum towards now. And so a nation in camps, also the Catholic Church decided at the Second Vatican Council to readdress itself to the modern world, having not done so for 400 years. And particularly in the United States, I don't know. I hope we've learned a lot. You don't introduce change by throwing out the praxis before you educate people and pray about it. And so what happened in a lot of American parishes, their priests read something, went to a conference, and next week you come in, and now the priest is, there's an altar with a cloth on it in front of the high altar, and he's facing you. And you had no lead up for that. There was no bringing people along in all cases. Not everywhere, but in many cases. And it's particularly the feeling of many Catholics was, this is, I don't understand this. Where did this come from? Now I'm a convert to Catholicism. I'll just put that out there for you. I joined a church in the 1970s. Okay, our church was a very modern building. It had orange carpet. We had burlap banners and balloons in the sanctuary. I loved all of that. Okay, so I know nothing of the Latin Mass. I didn't get any of that in seminary. I studied Latin in high school, in public school, by the way. I didn't go to Catholic school until I went into seminary. And so even my own religious experience is such that I have felt as a priest some of that tension between the two different understandings and interpretations of the Second Vatican Council that continue to be flashpoints for us today. Also, in the 1970s and 1980s, you saw the rise of evangelicalism in this country. A guy named Jerry Falwell was the leader of Moral Majority. He and Ronald Reagan got on the same page very, very quickly. And the evangelical churches gave a whole different spin to American Christianity and caused a lot of reaction on the part of mainline Protestantism and Catholicism, which we are still dealing with today. However, after 20, 30 years of seeing evangelical churches grow, they too are experiencing diminishment. So I don't know you don't have to feel vindicated as a Catholic over that. But the reality is that there is a decline in church membership across the board in America. That's just dealing with net facts and data. And so in the midst of that, you have my experience personally in encountering scouting. 1982, I came home from college. The country's in the middle of a recession. I expected to come home and get a job at a McDonald's or something. You know, I got home and I discovered there were men laid off from factory jobs in Louisville who were working in McDonald's to keep their families from being evicted. So those jobs weren't available. And my godfather, all his kids went through scouting. One of his sons told me, hey, I hear they're looking for counselors at the scout camp. I'm like, oh, Jesus. What? And so sure enough, yeah, they were desperate enough that they hired me. And I went to camp school in Chillicothe, Ohio, one of the most godforsaken places on the face of the earth. It was like being in Vietnam. I never have been there, but we went there to camp school. It rained every day. It was about 90 degrees and about 90% humidity all day and night. And after that, came back and worked 8 weeks in our local scout camp, which has now been subsumed by the council. It's a cub camp, but Tunnel Mill. And I lived in a tent for 8 weeks, and every week we did the same program. And made $100 a week and managed to live the next year in college off of $800. Yes, I do know how to budget. But after that, I thought, thank God, that's over. I don't ever have to do that again, and I won't. And then jump ahead about 30 years. And I find myself assigned as a pastor in Louisville with a very large scouting program, over 150 kids in scouting, both in Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. And I run into these very enthusiastic lay leaders who say, Father, we want you to become involved in our scouting program. And I said yes. And then I ended up at the National Jamboree, and I ended up at Philmont, and now I'm here with you this morning. And so I am adamant about the role of priests in scouting. That's what I can address. I've never been a scoutmaster. I've never been a parent, obviously. So there are certain aspects of this that I cannot give you the personal experience. But it is my contention that the number one thing we need to do as scout leaders is engage clergy. If you want Catholic scouting to grow, you have got to engage priests. And I will talk about that more maybe this afternoon if need be, but where are we at today? With the NCCS and most local dioceses, I don't know about yours, I believe Nashville is on the same page, but I don't know about all the dioceses here in the region. Scouting has come under the umbrella of youth ministry in most dioceses around the country. So having a relationship with your diocesan youth minister is first and foremost what you got to do. And my experience is that some of those individuals have some experience of scouting firsthand. Most of them do not. And so how do you build bridges with those individuals? NCCS's work with the National Federation of Youth Ministers, I think, is a wonderful thing on the national level, but you need to do that on the local level as well. Our local Catholic Scouting Committee works directly with our Director of Youth Ministry. We meet quarterly, and he meets with us, whether in person or on Zoom. And so, in fact, he's very tenacious about his role and his place in the leadership chart of the diocese. So he makes it very clear that we are under him. It's like, it's okay, that's good, Michael. We'll do whatever we need to do. But I'm also the scout chaplain for the diocese. So I have the direct ear of the bishop and meet with him directly. And when there are scouting issues, he doesn't call Michael, he calls me, particularly if there are issues that are problematic. So one of the hats I wear is helping my bishop be able to maintain a positive spin on scouting. And that's very important. And I think that's a role we all play, but particularly as the diocesan chaplain. During this, the last 10, 15 years, scouting programs have, and I don't mean just BSA, I mean the Girl Scouts of America as well, have come under fire from some in American society, including Catholic hierarchy and Catholic individuals. We've had some issues, obviously, around lawsuits. Okay. If anyone should be humble about all this, and when it comes to youth protection, it's the Roman Catholic Church in the United States of America. And so the idea that the Boy Scouts experienced sexual abuse should have not come to any surprise of anyone in the Catholic community. However, I think we can now safely say that we have become extremely proactive on youth protection. And my diocese has an excellent youth protection program, which we're all required to adhere to and maintain. But I will tell you point blank that Scouting America has a better program. I've told my bishop that. I've told my chancellor that. I think we have added a bullying component to our program, but Scouting had that first. It also is required that you take that every 2 years. I think it's going to go to every year. That's what I'm hearing. That's a good thing. That's a very good thing that we are able to tell people that, and legitimately be leaders in American society when it comes to youth ministry. There are also some issues regarding newer scouting or organizations, such as Trail Life and American Heritage Girls, and also the Troops of St. George. Now, I have very little experience with the Troops of St. George, so I can't tell you much about them, honestly. But Trail Life and American Heritage Girls have become options for American families, both Catholic, Protestant alike. It is a specifically Christian-oriented scouting program, unlike Scouting America, which welcomes all faiths and every persuasion. At this point in my life and my journey as a pastor, I am 63 years old. I'm not fighting battles anymore about which organization families choose to have their kids participate in. For me, it's like communion. I spent about 10 years of my priesthood heatedly involved in issues about how to receive communion, whether on the hand or on the tongue, okay? Again, I don't have any experience of the pre-Vatican II Church, and right now as a pastor, what I'm happy about is that people come to Mass and go to communion. Honestly, when I see the percentage of parents in my own school that don't come to Mass, I don't care how you receive communion. I just want you to get the body of Christ. I want you to be closer to Jesus. That's all I care about. If it matters to you, great. I don't care. Kneel, stand. I want you to participate in the Catholic life. I want you to be filled with the sacramental element that the Catholic Church is really good at. Okay? We're not really good at preaching. Sorry to my brother priest. We're not. Okay? We try, but when you come from a Pentecostal background like I do, and the sermon should last an hour, and we're supposed to get it all in 8 minutes, because that's apparently Catholic attention span, good luck. Good luck, okay? The liturgy of the word itself lasts more than 8 minutes. And if I'm supposed to apply 2,000 years of scriptural history to your life in less than 10 minutes, how can I possibly be effective? So those are the realities under which we live. But, you know, I don't have time. As I like to say now, my life is half over. I'm not going to spend the second half of it arguing about things that divide. I'm looking to how to unite people. Now, that doesn't mean that you water down the substance, okay? One of those issues that's a hot button issue, we saw the handout that Jim gave last night about citizenship in a society, the new merit, relatively new merit badge that Scouting America has introduced. You know, I dealt with some of the immediate reactions to that badge, and this is going to ruin scouting, and my kid's going to have to sit down with a cross-dresser and read a book in a library, and da-da-da-da-da-da, and I'm like, no, they're not. But to quiet people, I actually took the training to become a merit badge counselor for citizenship and society myself. What I encountered that was more alarming to me was not the potential pitfalls that someone might fall into morally, but the fact that a large number of our kids were incapable of being articulate. They didn't have the social skills to interact with me about that experience. It was like pulling teeth. It took me 8 weeks to get 12 scouts through that merit badge. And finally, after the 6th week, I told them, I said, I'm coming back here 2 more Wednesdays. And if you're not done with this, then you can do this on your own. All of a sudden, they got it together. But I mean, it was alarming to me that kids were so socially awkward at having a conversation. And their written skills, some of these are kids that go to Catholic school, some of them go to public school. Their written skills were like, I looked like I was reading something that a 3rd or 4th grader wrote down on paper. Those were the things that alarmed me, not the content of what came up. I'm suggesting that when you deal with some of those kinds of issues, you need to bring the Catholic aspect forward. That means our leaders need to be well-versed in the Catholic faith. Some of the things that we just saw this morning about leadership training, I think, are very important. Now, let's just pick another transgender hot-button issue. Okay. Immediately on Facebook, I had friends of mine from high school, from college, when I put out on my Facebook page that Scouting America has already and is currently a co-ed scouting organization, much like the rest of the world. Let me say that again. Much like the rest of the world. Part of the reality of what's going on in the last 18 months in this country is Americans think everything needs to be the way Americans do it. And the point of fact is that Scouting has been a co-ed program in many parts of the world for decades. Okay? But it doesn't mean that, for example, if a local pastor and unit leaders don't want to have a co-ed program, they don't have to. They don't have to do that. But if you do, then there's a way to do it that is appropriate. I don't think we're in a position, obviously, as Catholic individuals, we're not going to deflate or go against or contradict Catholic teaching. Okay, that's not what this is about. We come to the issue of, and honestly, I don't know what Scouting America's position on transgender youth is. I know they allow transgender youth to participate, and one of the goals that we should have is help kids, families find a place where that can happen for them. I do think, and this is just my personal bias, somehow one of the things I do like about the 1950s, why is a 6-year-old worried about sex? Huh? I don't know about you. I mean, I don't think I led a sheltered life, but I wasn't worried about the fact that, I had G.I. Joes, and my friends in the neighborhood who were girls had Barbie dolls. We were not like marred for life because we played with dolls. I'm sorry, that's what G.I. Joes were, for those of you who had those. Okay. Did it ruin your life? Are you completely incapable of functioning as an adult? I don't think so. But the reality is that when you've got situations where a child is being given hormonal therapy, and you're talking about beginning to do sex reassignment surgery on a minor, that's just not a place that the Catholic Church is even going to have a conversation. And it's not going to fly in the world of Catholic scouting. So I don't think there's a whole lot that needs to be debated. What the issue is the perception in the mind of some people that, you have a co-ed program, you're opening the doors to all of this. Well, remember, there's a door. And the magisterium of the church is the keeper of the door. And we are arms and agents of that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with establishing that and just saying that. What do you mean circle back? I'm sorry? Explain it more. Okay, the bishops of the church and the Pope are the official teachers of the church, the magisterial teaching. They are the ones who interpret for us sacred tradition and scripture. And they are the ones who, in effect, decide the issue for us. As priests at the local level and as laity, and whether we are leaders in a parish or in the business world, in family life, wherever your role is, part of our responsibility as Catholics is to put the teaching of the church into action at all levels of society, regardless of whether we're talking about bedroom issues or boardroom issues. Catholic teaching covers every aspect of human experience. And that makes it both challenging and also affirming at the same time. The bishop is the doorkeeper. You all at the diocesan level, you have got to get on good terms with clergy, with diocesan officials, and ultimately your bishop. I'm blessed to have a bishop who was a Cub Scout. Now, I don't know if you know Shelton Fobb. John can back me up on this. I really can't imagine Archbishop Shelton at a campout. I just can't. He has very, very good taste in Scotch. Thank you very much. He and I are one of the few Scotch drinkers among the presbyterate in a land filled with bourbon. But the notion that Archbishop Shelton is going to get dirty, that is going to sleep in a tent and there'd be bugs. I mean, even as a 6-year-old, 7-year-old, I can't picture it. But he did it. He did it. And he has fond memories of it. I'm sure they're memories. But that notwithstanding, 2 years ago at our scout camp for our council, we have Mass every Wednesday evening during the summer camp. He came and celebrated Mass. So that's the kind of engagement that I'm talking about. I think if you make it clear that the first thing we are is Catholic scouts, I think that's really crucial. Rather than scouts who happen to be Catholic or scouts who do Catholic stuff. Yeah.
Father, for so long there was such a respect for the recognition of the LDS and scouting. How LDS got behind scouting, how they really. I'm not commenting on LDS. I'm commenting on LDS scouting, and there was an appreciation. There was a overall positive view of a church and scouting, and I'm applying that to Catholic scouting now, the positive view of Catholic scouting. It's just interesting what you're taking.
Well, I think I don't know the whole history of that, honestly. But what I can tell you from my perspective is that the sexual abuse was a reality in some of those places within scouting and within the LDS Church. And yet, the hot button issue, I think, for both Mormons and Catholics was when the Boy Scouts of America allowed homosexuals to be leaders in scouting, okay? And not only that, but those who are also active in living a homosexual lifestyle. And again, there were two choices that could be made. You could pull out and leave, which is what the Mormons did, and what some Catholics, individuals and bishops and others have done. Or you can also do the harder work, which is engage over 130 years of tradition in this country of how do you work within American society, and you take that which is supportive of Catholicism and celebrate it, and that which is not, you say, we're not going to allow that. And so you become the gatekeeper, the door, if you will. Rather than just throw the entire tradition out. And meanwhile, as has happened with the Girl Scouts in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati. The Archbishop there has dismissed Girl Scouts and said that the default is going to be American Heritage Girls. Now, I have no problem with American Heritage Girls, but I would never guarantee that a given Catholic leader in American Heritage Girls is any more knowledgeable about the Catholic tradition than a Catholic Boy Scout troop leader. I think both are in need of the kind of education that you mentioned in your presentation and that I would still point to in some of the handouts that I've made. We need to do more to put ourselves as Catholic Scout leaders in the world of youth ministry and Catholic religious education. And I'll just jump to my conclusion. Look behind you. Those two banners right there, that's where we need to lead. Lead. And I say that as almost, I would make it, frankly, a litmus test. If you have a Catholic unit that is sponsored by a Catholic church, parish, and you're not doing religious emblems and religious activities, you should not be rechartered. Period. And there's where the parish priest needs to understand, Father, look at all this. Look at what we have to offer you. And as a pastor of two small, rather poor parishes, I don't have money to hire a youth minister. My DRE works in two different parishes part-time. NCCS doesn't like me saying it, but Bill and I agree. This is the best religious education program going on for Catholic kids in the United States of America right now. It's better than any book you're going to buy or series you're going to get. If you look through Light of Christ, Parvulary Day, Alotari Day, Pope Pius XII, it follows every aspect of the catechism, sacramental preparation, as well as social justice teaching and discipleship. And you get something. Not just a piece of paper that you know you're going to lose, but a medal. And if you do them all, you're going to get that Pillars of Faith Award, which is even rarer than Eagle Scout in Scouting America. So I'm not willing anymore, gentlemen and ladies, to be reactive. I want to go on the offense. I want to be in your face about all that. And I think it's great. You guys that got all this stuff out here, Jim, the framed, all this, I want that for my diocese. I want that for my Catholic committee. I want to be able to take that stuff on the road and set it up in every vestibule of every parish in my diocese and say, this is what we've got to offer you. Instead of, well, if you don't have anything else to do, and if you're like antisocial and awkward and backward, well, here, come be a scout. If you're not on the ball team and you're not obsessed with athletic practices, come join scouting. No, no, no. This is the best thing we've got going because we're now in our second generation of Catholics, and I'm talking about people who still go to Mass, not the unchurched. I'm talking about practicing Catholics. We're in our second generation now of people who don't understand the basic principles of our faith. They made First Communion. Many of them got confirmed. Many of them were married in the church. I'll stop there. But the point is, many of these are family-based activities. I mean, parents today, they want to know everything their kid's involved in. My mom and dad could have cared less. My mom threw us out every morning and said, don't come back till lunch. And you had 20 minutes to eat and threw you back out again. Don't come back till supper. And you better be in before the streetlights are on. We were doing all kinds of things that she would be arrested for today while she didn't know it. My dad was at work all day. And don't ever call me to come to school. Because if there's a problem, whatever happens at school, I'll be dead when I get home. It doesn't matter. But parenting is very different now. I'll just tell you right now, it's a challenge at the Cub Scout level, having parents at the troop meeting, because a lot of them don't want to be involved. They still want to drop off their kid, be left alone. I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. Especially when you've got boys that don't have dads and when you have girls that don't have moms. And those leaders They don't take the place of parents, but they become surrogates. They become leaders. They become people who will tell a kid the truth. I taught high school for 12 years, sophomores. I made a living having teenagers not like me because I wasn't their friend. I wasn't their friend. And I told them that. I'm not your friend. I'm your priest. If you want somebody to make excuses for you, go home. I'm holding up a bar that you need to measure up to. And it took a couple years for people to figure me out. Parents would come and say, how could a kid possibly fail religion? I'd show them the grade book. Like, here, you do the math. You don't turn anything, you get a 0. You could fail my class too. Easily. So, I mean, part of it is what do you expect of people? And I don't think we have done nearly enough yet to bring our scouting leaders along to help them understand that they are leaders in the faith too. We have amazing scout leaders who have given their entire life to scouting. And they know that scout handbook back and forth and all the skills that come along with it. What we're going to also have to bring them up to speed on is how do you become a religious educator? How do you form young men and women in the Catholic tradition? How do you help little kids celebrate their Catholic faith by getting one of those American Saints patches? That's the goal, I think, for the remainder of my life in scouting. It's not to become defensive about everything that comes across the social media page and what's the latest culture war battle that we want to fight. I don't have time for that anymore. I'm not saying it's not important. I think we have to address it. But the real reality is that we got broken families. We got kids that are raising themselves, and mom and dad are doing everything from A to Z. Many of them are overworked. They're in debt up to their eyeballs. They have a mortgage that's beyond anybody's ability to cope. They're totally upside down on many levels of their life. And the hour and a half that their kid spends in your weekly troop meeting might be the most stable part of their life. And I think we have to take that role very, very seriously. And not just see ourselves as one among lots of other things that kids can spend their time doing. I think you have to have a missiological, evangelical approach to this. I mean, when I was teaching high school, who were the most important people in the school? The coaches. Why? Because the kids want to play. They'd do anything to pass my class so they could play basketball. Good. I use it as a motivator. The last thing I wanted to do was go to Friday night basketball games, but I did for years. Last thing a priest might want to do is show up at a scout meeting or go to a blue and gold banquet. But that's where they need to be invited. Ask them, encourage them to do Scout Sunday. Get on their agenda. Negotiate with whoever plans your diocesan annual meeting. What do they call it? When your priests get together, Father, I don't know, what is your name for it? Your convocation. Get on that. Our Catholic Scouting Committee sponsors a cocktail hour every year that Wednesday evening before the main banquet. How did we get there? We pushed ourselves in the door. That's how. What? We sponsor a cocktail hour for the scouting for the priests of our diocese, and we have a reception for them before their banquet. We're not in uniform, by the way. But we do something to get their attention. We go where they are rather than expecting priests to come to us. Yeah.
Well, Troy, I really liked your comment about Scout Sunday, and it's something that I wrote down here on your last page. Your bullet point, all your bullet points are really good. The third from the bottom, which talks about promoting the presence of scouts in any kind of function. That really made me think of this, and what I aligned it with was the Knights of Columbus. The Knights.
They're your best partners.
And they are, and I in my role as a scout master, in the parish. They've been supportive, and that's even extended now into the Catholic communities.
And I think another thing that Scout Sunday helps us do, one of the many ways, not the only way, but a very important thing, it helps us recapture patriotism.
And I hear that when you do it, but you had mentioned something about the medal, is the Catholic unit earning Catholic medals? I believe as well consideration is the church that is chartering, the Catholic Church is chartering the truth, are they doing a Scout Sunday? Or simple things like that? They're really important things.
Obviously, that might begin with an initiative from within the local parish Scout leadership, but the pastor ultimately has to say yes to that. So I mean, there's where the conversation begins. But I mean, I'm a huge one on that Class A uniform. I don't even want a kid in blue jeans. What are you doing in here? You can't afford the jeans? I tell my Scoutmaster, any kid that can't afford the fee to be in Scouts, any kid that can't afford the uniform, the parish will pay for all of it. That's how much I believe in it. And that's the least of it, getting the kid in the uniform. One of the worst things, I'm a 4th degree knight, so I can say this. One of the worst things the Knights of Columbus gave up is their uniform. I don't care if it did look like something out of the Middle Ages. It made you distinctive. They're like, I don't know what that chapeau thing is or what that feathered hat is, but I want one of those. And I made them. When they made me a 4th degree, they said, Father, you can't have a sword. We don't give priests a sword. I said, I won't join unless you give me I don't want a sword, I want a sword. And they found some old sword that some dead knight had, and I got a sword. It hangs in my office because I wouldn't join without it. So, I mean, when we show up fully dressed and ready to go, and you carry the flags down the aisle of a church, my church has flags back in the church. We've surrendered some of that to a segment of American Christianity, and to our detriment, because we've allowed a certain segment of American Christianity to say we're patriotic, and these aren't. It feeds into that divisiveness. Does that mean I'm a warmonger? Absolutely not. But I'm absolutely proud to be an American and an American Catholic and a Boy Scout in that order. And those are the realities under which I expect anybody that wants to run a scouting program in my parish to adhere to. And you're not going to be shy and bashful about it. We have a tiny troop. We got like 8 kids, and that's if they all show up. Okay, we barely have enough to charter. Okay, and I'm scared to death that once my Scoutmaster's kid gets out of school, the whole thing's going to go belly up. And here I am, a regional chaplain, a diocesan chaplain, and I don't have a troop anymore. How can that be? I don't want to go there. But that's the reality of what we're looking at. But to me, we got to be more assertive. Now, I put out here a couple of things for you, documentation that are agreements between the NCCS and the USCCB. It is an advisory role, if you notice that. Okay, we do not speak on behalf of the United States Bishops' Conference. We are an advisory committee, and we have a very strong relationship. That document doesn't necessarily spell that out very well, honestly. And if you look at the agreement, local agreement, I emphasize local, from the Archdiocese of Louisville and the Girl Scouts of Kentuckiana. Now, the Girl Scouts are structured a little differently. Their local councils have more autonomy, and they don't have as I'll say the word, powerful national leadership. On the Girl Scout level in Kentuckiana, there's language in there that directly says we will not require anything that is in violation of Catholic teaching. That's pretty direct. That's pretty clear. Okay, and to go a step further, the Bishop of Fort Worth, he has required that anybody in scouting do the same kind of training that anyone else in youth ministry and catechetical leadership does. I think that's where we're going. And I know you got some old crusty guys that have been scout leaders for 20 years. I'm not doing that. Help them along. And ultimately, if you can't, you might need to bring on some new leadership. Or maybe you have some subsidiarity. What about a troop that is not, where the scoutmaster is not Catholic? We have several of those at home. I'm sure you do as well. Does that mean you kick them out? Not right away. Do we try and get a Catholic person to take that scoutmaster role? Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay? And you might need to look at viability of the troop itself. But is the assistant scoutmaster there a Catholic? Do people see them at Mass on Sunday? Are they known as Catholic leaders? Who is your religious emblems coordinator? That person ought to be at the level of an assistant scoutmaster, not some nice lady that does stuff on the side because she doesn't have a life. No. They should be elevated to the role of central leadership in the troop. And everybody should understand that. Parents, the other leaders, the scouts, and most of all, the pastor. And the last, probably most person that is taken for granted the most is the COR, who in my experience tends to be an aged person who really doesn't want to be an active leader anymore, but is willing to sign the document with the priest. You need the most outgoing, in-your-face, I'm in love with Catholic scouting person to be the COR. Why? Because they're your link to the rectory. That's the person that connects you to the pastor, officially within scouting. They have a role specifically to work with the chief executive officer of the troop. And that's invaluable. Take advantage of it. I know I've taken way too much of your time, and we're going to go over. But here, come on.